Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Danielle. I'm coming to you from a particular weird situation. I am recording this on my phone. Little different, I know. Long story short, my computer, I have to take it to the Apple Store tomorrow and get it updated because it will not update on its own, and my editing software that I import and record on will not open, and I need to get this episode up for you guys. So, shout out to my lovely boss, Sarah, who hopefully, I emailed her in a panic. Hopefully she puts this together for you guys. But if there's any weird, if it sounds different, that is because. But I wanted to get you guys a podcast today because what a week of college football it was. For starters, I hope you all had a lovely weekend, to say the least. I know I did. I'm trying to think what I did besides watch football all day yesterday. I went to a fish place on Friday night. San Diego was currently back in the purple zone for COVID, so, things are a little different here now. My life hasn't really changed. I wasn't really doing anything crazy that would drastically change because of COVID, in a good way, I guess. And then today, I just watched Prison Break and work all day. So, pretty good Sunday in my book. But I hope you guys are all having a great Monday when you're listening to this, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Podcast Network. Anyways, guys, let's get on with it today. We got a very exciting episode for you all. First up, we're going to get into the Pac-12. We're going to get into the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, and some other good games. Also important to note that this was a weird week of college football, to say the least. If you guys did not know, a lot of games were canceled. A lot of games were postponed. We actually had a game today, Cal versus UCLA. Really weird. Really stinking weird, all I gotta say. But it was definitely a weirder week of college football. Is that the only way to put it? But we still had some good games, some good stuff to get to. Let's kick it off with our first segment of the day. We're going to be getting into Stanford versus Colorado. You guys know I'm a Buffs gal. You know I go to Colorado. Also, my mom went to Stanford. So I walked into my house on Saturday morning and she was like, there's the enemy. I guess I'm still the enemy because Colorado beat the Stanford Cardinal. Everyone doesn't know what Stanford's mascot is. I believe, after my years of attending or being a part of a Stanford family, it is a tree or the tree. They always say for the tree. The tree. The Colorado Buffaloes beat the Stanford Cardinal 35-32, and it's Palo Alto. So Sam Neuer passed for 2 touchdowns and ran for 2 more. Jarek Broussard had another strong rushing day, and Colorado held on to beat Stanford 35-32 on Saturday. Like I said, DeMontre Stanley caught 6 passes for 126 yards and a score as the Buffaloes remain unbeaten under first-year head coach Carl Durrell, who was replacing Mel Tucker after he departed to Michigan State abruptly. Sam Neuer, who actually... Fun story here. He came to Colorado as a freshman, and he entered the transfer portal back in December because he wanted a chance to play quarterback somewhere else. He graduated with a degree, and he's getting a chance to start for the Buffaloes. Super exciting. I actually have met the guy. Very in passing. We had a class together my freshman year. Super nice guy. But we got something special here. We got something going on here. We got something great here. Neuer said, we're building something special with Coach Durrell. Everyone's buying in. Guys are having fun out there. It's good to see that again. I haven't seen that in a couple years. Neuer, a fifth-year senior who nearly transferred out of Colorado after playing safety last season, threw an interception on his 4th pass of the afternoon, then settled in to complete 15 of 24 attempts for 255 yards. Neuer scored on a 7-yard open option keeper midway through the second quarter. Then the Buffaloes on 3 scoring drives coming out of halftime. Ben Rice had a 34-yard touchdown catch, and Jaron McGannon had a 1-yard touchdown run for Colorado, who is now 2-2 and 2-0 in Pac-12 overall. Darrell said, "We feel like we've built a pretty comfortable lead. It wasn't too comfortable. They came back, but our players hung in there. This is a good win for us on the road. There are going to be some things we're going to be upset with, but we'll work to get them fixed. That's part of the process." David Mills passed for 327 yards for Stanford after he was incorrectly ruled positive for COVID last week. He was one of the 4 players forced to sit out because of the coronavirus concerns. The Pac-12 later admitted there were testing issues in the protocol that kept the 4 players out, and Mills did not need to be put in isolation. So obviously upset about that, but he played decently. Stanford is now 0-2, like I said. It's obvious he was rusty. Stanford coach David Saw said of the quarterback, he came in isolation. Was in isolation essentially from Saturday until Thursday night. He was able to come in and get 1 practice, and it showed. There's not much we can have done about it, but to say that it didn't affect his performance, I think would be inaccurate. Jeff Toner added 3 field goals for the Cardinal, and Stanford lost its first home opener for the first time since 2007. Colorado did outgain the Stanford Cardinal 432 yards to 403 yards to win on the road for just the 7th time over the past 3 seasons. Broussard put up a stellar performance against UCLA with another one with 121 yards on 27 carries. Darrell said about the Buffaloes, "Our guys keep fighting. I would have loved to finish the game like we did last week where we had the ball and took a knee. The fortunate thing is we got the win." The Cardinal did attempt onside kicks after David Mills completed a touchdown and a 2-yard pass to Tucker Fish to make it 35-32. They came back after Colorado took a pretty decent lead, but they did get the win. The Buffaloes are 2-0 in the Pac-12 for the 3rd time in the last 5 years. They've done it despite having yet another head coach and no offseason. It's early, but back-to-back wins over Stanford could alter the way people look at Colorado. And for Stanford, Mills did look good on the Cardinals' first drive, but he was uneven the rest of the day. I did watch this game, and I will admit I was rooting for Boulder. But, far too many defensive breakdowns in coverage. Well, let's get on to the more exciting game of the day, people, which was number 20, USC, going up against Arizona. USC looked like they were going to be upset here. Once again, USC fought to the very finish against another Arizona team, and they won 37-30. They had 2 minute penalties. They struggled in the red zone, and they found themselves late in a hole. They found themselves in a late hole for the 2nd straight week. The Trojans did, however, rally to win with another pair of late scoring drives. Vele Mailapai bullied his way through multiple tackles for an 8-yard touchdown run with 25 seconds remaining, and number 20 beat the Arizona Wildcats 34-30 on Saturday. "We've got some things ahead of us, but we're 2-0. Clay Helton said a lot of teams would like to be in that position. USC was outplayed by Arizona State last week, but scored 2 touchdowns in the final 3 minutes. The Trojans rallied late to win a game that were outscored in for most of the afternoon. Kedon Slawless hit Eric Cumberhawk on a 6-yard touchdown drive, but Arizona marched down quickly with the field. So for a 6-yard touchdown pass from Grant Gunnell to Stanley Bayhill with 1:35 left. At the end, our kids did what they did last week. When it mattered the most, they never panicked. They showed great poise. Keldon Slawless, who was seen as one of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12, threw for 325 yards and a touchdown on 30 of 43 passing. Goodell threw for 286 yards and 3 touchdowns for Arizona, who played its first game in nearly a year after last week's opener against Utah was canceled due to coronavirus concerns. Utah's game this week was also canceled as well. While USC did win, it is important to know that this is the second time they've been undisciplined and disjointed at times on offense, particularly in the red zone. The Trojans are 2-0, but it is to be noted that they have some work to do, especially early in the game, and they can't keep pulling out these behind the back upsets, not even upsets, but wins, if you will. Arizona did not look rusty in the game. Gunnell was sharp, and the defense was solid. Some poll implications: USC might move up a spot. But the odds of them falling a little are even more likely against a team that they were heavily favored against because they were down to the wire. Their big struggle of the week, however, was their penalties, and they were unable to capitalize in the red zone. USC had 11 penalties for 110 yards and twice came away with no points after reaching Arizona's 5-yard line. Up next, though, USC will play Utah next Saturday. Oh, it was also just announced that Colorado's game against ASU has been postponed. next week, and Arizona is at Washington next week. But speaking of Washington, not really, we're going to get into number 11 Oregon, who is seen as the Pac-12's biggest chance to get into the playoffs this year. We're going to look at number 11 Oregon versus Washington State. Washington State, fun fact, I almost went there, but I almost went to Oregon as well. But number 11 Oregon took down the Washington State Cougars pretty handily, 43-29. Running back Travis Day of number 11 Oregon recalled the bitter feeling after the Ducks lost to Washington State in 2018, and they did not have to feel that pain Saturday night. Day caught a pair of second-half touchdown passes, and Oregon came back to beat Washington State 43-29. I remember every little detail of 2018. It stuck in my mind forever since we left that field. He recalled Saturday's win, a thirst clencher. Tyler Slurgo threw for 312 yards and 4 touchdowns for Oregon. The Ducks improved to 2-0, pulling up 582 yards of total offense. Freshman Jaden Laura threw for 321 yards and 2 touchdowns for Washington State, who is now 1-1. They led at halftime, but they cannot stop the Ducks in the second half. Like I said, the Ducks are seen as the favorite in the Pac-12 to be able to contend for the college football playoff. Oregon coach Mario Cristobal said the touchdown Oregon scored in the closing seconds of the second quarter was key. It caught Washington State's half from 12-5. Huge momentum swing. He said, going into the locker room with a lot of juice, a lot of energy. Charlo played well, especially in the second half, he said. They had some great plays and make great decision play. Great job with protections, used their feet to get out of stuff. Just showing tremendous maturity in just a second start. So many big days ahead for Tyler. We felt we couldn't stop us when we were doing our job and not turning the ball over. Oregon scored 29 times in the second half, and this was the second straight game in which the Cougars had given up a lot of points after halftime. I don't think we're wearing down, Washington State coach Nick Rolovich said. They're just playing their hearts out. He did point to the Cougars recovering 3 straight Oregon turnovers in the first half and only producing 10 points out of those. That game should have been different at halftime. He did add that DeLaura, a true freshman, played well in only his second college outing. The big takeaway from this is that the Oregon Ducks have won 17 of their past 19 games and are on track to claim a second consecutive Pac-12 championship. They overcame 3 consecutive turnovers in the first half for their first win in Pullman, Washington, since 2014. This game did mark the home opener for Rolovich, and the Cougars were picked to finish last in the Pac-12 North, but they've looked much better in their first 2 games so far. The big poll implication is that Oregon might get into the top 10, and that's about it. Washington State is at Stanford on Saturday, and Oregon will host UCLA on Saturday. Next up, people, we're going to get into our next segment of the day where we are going to look at the SEC and the ACC. So stay tuned for that.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC College Football, the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Danielle. We're here with our second segment of the day, and this segment is the most depleted due to COVID. It was a crazy week for COVID. I'm sure you guys all heard about the cancellations of the Alabama-LSU game, the number 1 Alabama team, who had last week off, did also have this week off. We also had Auburn at Mississippi State, Texas A&M at Tennessee, Auburn at LSU, and Georgia at Missouri at Georgia for the big canceled games of the week. We also had, for the ACC, we had Pitt at Georgia Tech postponed. Clemson at number 2 Clemson was also off this week. So a little bit lighter of a segment, if you will, just because we had so many canceled games. But I want to point out the first game of the SEC, which was Kentucky-Vanderbilt, not for necessarily a play. This was not a game that many people were looking at. But I did want to honor offensive line coach John Schulman, who died on Thursday after a long battle with cancer. The Kentucky Wildcats honored their former offensive lineman coach by lining up without a left guard and taking a delay of game penalty on the first play from scrimmage. Vanderbilt declined the penalty. Then Kentucky senior left tackle Landon Young came in on the next play wearing Schillerman's 35 jersey. He was a 4-year starter at Kentucky from 1994 to 97. He earned all SEC honors as a senior before going into coaching. He coached at Troy before returning to Kentucky as part of the head coach's Mark Stoops' first staff in 2013. In 2016 and 2019, they were finalists for the John Moore Award given to the nation's top offensive lineman. Schulman was diagnosed with, if I mispronounce this, a rare form of cancer of the bile ducts more than 2 years ago. He rarely missed a practice. He shuttled back and forth from Lexington to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to receive treatments. Recently, the cancer had spread to his liver, lungs, and pituitary cavities. He died Thursday at the age of 45, and he was beloved by players and coaches for his kindness, determination, and overwhelming optimism. Stoops said his nickname was the Great American. Stoops said in a statement that he was heartbroken to learn about the passing of his friend, and his prayers go out to his family and children. A very difficult time. I do want to send prayers and love to his family. I can't imagine what they're going through, but I wanted to start out by highlighting that. That's amazing that they did, and I always get emotional with those kind of things, but yes, like I said, prayers up to his family and the Kentucky program in general. I can't imagine the sorrow they feel right now. They did, however, get a win on Saturday, going 38-35 over the Vanderbilt Commodores. Kentucky quarterback Terry Wilson accounted for 3 touchdowns. Chris Rodriguez rushed for 2 scores, including a 74-yarder, before the Wildcats withstood Vanderbilt's late rally to win 38-35 on Saturday. They were rested from a bye, and with Wilson back from a 1-game absence because of a wrist injury, the Wildcats, who are now 3-4, moved the ball at will against the Commodores, who were 0-6, with 5 touchdowns and a field goal on their first 7 possessions. Wilson completed 13 of 15 passes for 110 yards and rushed 7 times for 83 yards. Like I said, they did honor his coach, and Kentucky ended up needing the cushion after Chance Poore kicked a 28 yards field goal as Vanderbilt answered with Mitchell Pryor's 2-yard touchdown run before Kevin Stiles' 7-yard scoring pass to Cam Johnson with 30 seconds remaining to get within 3. The Wildcats, however, did recover the onside kick. The big takeaways from this is that Terry Wilson and the offense showed how rest and healing can help as the Wildcats scored on all first possessions. Chance Poore, like I said, playing in place of Matt Ruffalo, ended up providing the difference. Ruffalo and All-American punter Max Duffy are among several players out for the reasons their absences are not immediately known. Vanderbilt seeks to end their 6-game losing series against the Gators as they host number 6 Florida on Saturday, and Kentucky visits top-ranked Alabama on Saturday in their first week of consecutive challenges against top SEC teams and leaders. Number 6 Florida does loom next week. Like I said, once again, prayers to Schulman's family. Next, speaking of number 6 Florida, guys, wow, look at my consistency here. We have Arkansas, the Arkansas Razorbacks, who provided a little upset throughout the season, upsetting Mississippi State, who it's not as good as we thought they were. They went and visited number 6 Florida, but number 6 Florida took care of them, winning 36-25, and Kyle Trask has gone from a Heisman hopeful to a potential Heisman Trophy frontrunner in 2 months due to the fact that Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields all did not play today. Much of it coming in the last 2 months, in the last 2 weeks of his Heisman contending. He threw 356 yards and 6 touchdowns, which extended a school record for consecutive games with at least 4 touchdowns to 6. And number 6 Florida overwhelmed Arkansas 63-35 on Saturday in the Swamp. Track repeatedly torched the Razorbacks, who were without Coach Sam Pittman, who tested positive for COVID-19. They were much and didn't have a chance by halftime. This was the second time this season Trask has touched 6 times in a game. He is the only player in school history to accomplish that feat. The more success teams have, the more individual awards come. Coach Shane Mullen said, if we keep being successful as a team, we keep making these plays, he's going to have the opportunity to get individual awards. Arkansas quarterback Felipe Franks, a 3-year starter for the Gators, was booed early in his return to Florida Field and was unable to do much to steal the spotlight from Trask. The big takeaway from this is the Gators have the offense to beat just anyone after their throttle of Georgia last week, and the Razorbacks had an impressive start to the season, but it took an ugly turn in Gainesville. But they could rebound with winnable games against Missouri and LSU next. Up next, Arkansas is tentatively scheduled to host LSU next Saturday, but the Tigers are dealing with COVID-19 related issues that prompted their game against number 1 Alabama to be postponed. The Razorbacks have lost 4 straight to LSU. The Gators get on an airplane for the first time since its travel-related COVID outbreak last month and faces Vanderbilt next Saturday. The Gators have won 28 of 29, including 6 in a row in the series. Let's get on to the ACC, people. ACC, a little bit of a lighter week. Probably heavier in news, though, than the SEC. Let's start off with number 2 Notre Dame, who is coming off the game of the year, in my opinion. I mean, the game of the year. And they travel for their annual rivalry against Boston College. They handled Boston College, to say the least. They do have a history of blowing big wins with lead letdowns against rival Boston College, but this time the Irish made up for it. They won 45-31 in Massachusetts. Ian Box passed for 3 touchdowns and ran for another, and the second-ranked Irish overcame an early deficit to roll to a 35-31 lead over Boston College on Saturday. The Fighting Irish 8th straight win in the series between FBS-only Catholic institutions gave Coach Brian Kelly his 100th career victory at the school, tying him for Lou Holtz for second all-time. He is now just 5 behind Kunt Ronke. 100 wins. I gotta say it felt like for 100 years, but that's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I will when I'm not coaching anymore, Kelly said. It means I've done a lot of good things, a lot of good coaches. I'm fortunate to be at Notre Dame this long. It's not easy to win that many games at Notre Dame. Coming off a thrilling victory against the then number 1 Clemson, Notre Dame racked up a season-high 561 total yards against Boston College. The last time Notre Dame beat a top-ranked team was in 1993, and then the following week, the Fighting Irish were upset by Boston College on a last-second field goal. Bach made sure there was no similar letdown. He finished 20 of 27 for 283 yards and ran for an 85-yard score. His last 2 games have been as well as he has played in 3 seasons as their starter. The big takeaway from this is that the Irish avoided a letdown after their big upset of the Tigers last week. And up next, Notre Dame visits North Carolina after an off week on November 27th, while Boston College visits Louisville. Next up on our list, we got number 9 Miami versus Virginia Tech, who avoided an upset over the Hokies by winning 25-24. They rallied for a victory on Saturday. The Hurricanes are now 7-1, with their only loss coming to top-ranked Clemson, and they rallied from an 11-point third-quarter deficit to win their 4th consecutive game and stay very much alive for a spot in the ACC championship game. Miami scored the final 12 points and held the Hokies scoreless on their final 5 possessions. King guided the Canes on 2 long scoring marches, a 13-play, 75-yard drive with Cameron Harris, their 16-yard touchdown run to cut the lead to 24-19 with 1 minute, 127 remaining in the third quarter. Miami did fail to convert a 2-point conversion. They put together a 10-play, 82-yard touchdown drive that ended with King throwing a dart to Mark Pope for a 36-yard touchdown run to take a 25-24 lead with 5:59 left in the quarter. The big takeaway from this is that the Hurricanes did play well on defense. They were missing a couple of starters. Miami held the Hokies to a season-low 160 yards rushing and sacked the Hokies 3 times, with Jalen Phillips providing a lot of the pressure. Poll implications is that Miami will remain in the top 10 and may jump a couple of spots. And lastly, on our ACC recaps and SEC recaps, let's get into North Carolina Wake Forest. Howell threw for Sam Howell, the North Carolina quarterback, threw for a record 550 yards, and they helped rally past Wake Forest 59-53 in one of the highest scoring game of the day by far. He scored the go-ahead rush. Sam Howell scored the go-ahead rushing touchdown with 4 minutes and 11 seconds remaining to help North Carolina rally past Wake Forest. His 20-yard keeper capped to come back from 21 down midway through the third quarter for the Tar Heels, tying the program record for their biggest comeback in a win. This is part of a run of 35 unanswered points after falling behind 45-24, with Howell and the Tar Heels offense rolling all day at a record-setting pace. UNC finished with the program best 742 yards, highlighted by some huge performances from receivers Daz Newsome. Javonte added a 15-yard touchdown run with 2:39 left to help keep UNC in control late. Hartman then threw for a career-best 429 yards and 4 touchdowns to help lead the Deacon Demons, who had their own huge offensive output, with 606 yards. Ja'Cory Robinson had 12 catches for 167 yards and 2 scores. but UNC's defense hung in and finally slowed the Demon Deacons, forcing punts on their next 4 drives to give Howell-led offense an opening. Hartman led one final scoring drive, but Williams recovered the onside kick with 56 seconds left to end all but a wild afternoon for the two teams. The big takeaway from this is that Demon Deacons entered this one with 4 straight wins, 3 coming in the ACC play, and just 1 turnover all season. They looked poised to be the Tar Heels for the second straight season, but came up empty on 5 straight drives. And for UNC, Coach Mac Brown talked about all this week how he wanted to see his team grow and mature and build off the win against Duke without having a setback, which has followed wins against Virginia Tech and North Carolina State, NC State. They flirted with another frustrating loss to turn things around. UNC is an open date before hosting number 2 Notre Dame on November 27th, which could be a very exciting game considering how Sam Howell is playing. And coming up, everybody, we're going to get to our third segment of the day, where we're going to be looking at some Group of 5 teams as well as the Big 12, so stick around.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to be getting into our third segment today, where we are looking at the Big 12 and some Group of 5 teams that have been playing, including Cincinnati, West Virginia. So let's get into it. Starting off with West Virginia, the Mountaineers went up against the TCU Horned Frogs, and they beat them 24-6. Nothing much to say there. Horned Frogs had Miles Sediger, who passed for 161 yards. Well, Dodge passed for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. TCU can never really get it going against West Virginia. But the more exciting game of today, the 2 exciting games I want to talk about, are Cincinnati versus East Carolina. Number 7, Cincinnati defeated East Carolina 55-17. Cincinnati had another big game, and so did Desmond Rader. Their defense did get some revenge, however. Rader threw for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns and ran for another score to help number 7 Cincinnati rout East Carolina 55-17 on Friday night. Cincinnati, who is now 7-0 and 5-0 in the ACC, extended their school record home winning streak to 19 games, the 4th longest streak in SBF schools, and kept their hopes alive for the college football playoff berth. Rader accounted for 17 touchdowns in the last 4 games, including 9 rushing touchdowns. Once play breaks down and I see the hole, I just let go. The offensive line has done a great job. The preparation has been good. In Cincinnati's 3-point victory at East Carolina last year, the Pirates scored 43 points and piled up 638 yards. The Bearcats were motivated to prevent a repeat. East Carolina had 293 total yards on a Friday night and more than 100 yards below its season average. The defense had an edge, a chip on their shoulder, said James Wiggins, a senior cornerback who had 5 tackles and their first interception of the season. The offense got off to a fast start with Ritter's 33-yard touchdown pass to Michael Young to cap a 79-yard touchdown drive on their opening possession. Desmond Rader is a talented quarterback. East Carolina coach Mike Houston said he makes them go. I think he's an NFL-type quarterback. The Bearcats did produce 653 yards of total offense and nearly 10 yards per play. This was Cincinnati's final home game of the season. The Bearcats finished the regular season with road games against Central Florida, Temple, and as we will talk about next, Tulsa. We'll see what we're made of, said Coach Fickle. It's going to be quite a stretch with a bullseye on our back. We need to be humble with what we're doing. Like I said, Cincinnati is facing Central Florida on November 21st. Speaking of Tulsa, people, let's get into it. Tulsa upset number 19 SMU 28-24 on Saturday. They once again managed to pull off an amazing comeback. Zach Smith threw for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns to help Tulsa recover from a 21-point second quarter deficit and beat number 19 SMU 28-24 on Saturday night after throwing an interception and losing a fumble that led to another fourth quarter touchdown on their first 2 possessions. Smith bounced back. He completed 26 for 38 passes, including a 4-yard touchdown toss to James Palmer with 2:11 remaining. The good thing about Zach is that he bounces back. Tulsa coach Philip Montgomery said he doesn't let things weigh on him. He's resilient, he's confident, he knows what he's doing, and he has to get in the rhythm. DK Wilkerson rushed for 94 yards and a touchdown for Tulsa, and Kaelon Stokes had 8 receptions for 122 yards, and Josh Johnson made 8 catches for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Shane Brusell completed 18 of 36 passes for 200 yards and 1 touchdown, along with 1 interception for SMU, who missed the opportunity to move ahead of Tulsa into second place in the American standings behind Cincinnati. Euless Bentley IV rushed for 103 yards and a touchdown for the Mustangs, who led 24-7 at halftime. We couldn't do anything on offense, SMU coach Sonny Dyke said. Bottom line is we didn't make plays. We didn't execute at all, just couldn't make a play. You've got to give them credit. You got to make the plays, and we did it. It's just one of those games. The Mustangs entered the game averaging 526.3 yards of total offense, but Tulsa limited them to just 351, while holding them to 4 of 6 on third down conversions, and SMU did not score at all in the second half. After several previous games were canceled due to COVID-19, Tulsa was playing its second home game of the season in front of a socially distanced crowd of just a little less than 4,000 people. The big takeaway from this is that the Mustangs, who entered the game 10th in the nation with 13 takeaways, got 2 more on Tulsa's first 2 possessions and then played a big role in their early lead. And the big takeaway for Tulsa is that the Golden Hurricanes continued a frustrating habit of starting out slowly. However, they did have a big comeback. SMU is slotted to fall completely out of the top 25, and Tulsa could move into the top 25. So that's exciting. And next up, SMU will host Houston on Saturday, and Tulsa will host Tulane on Thursday night. So coming after Buddy, we got a little shorter of a segment there, but not many games to cover in that segment. We got the Big Ten to get into for our final segment of the day. So stay tuned, everybody.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Danielle, here with you for our final segment of the day, where we're going to be looking at the Big Ten, who is playing their 4th week. I had a little brain fart there. They're playing their 4th week of the season after a slower start. First up, we are going to get into Penn State, Nebraska. Penn State was ranked very high this season, coming in at number 8, I believe. And they've completely fallen off. This is their first 0-4 start in quite a while since the Nebraska Cornhuskers beat them at 38-23 after Penn State tried to make a comeback late in the 4th, and it was unattainable. Luke McCaffrey had a hand at 2 touchdowns in their first start, and Nebraska's defense made 2 huge defensive stops, and the Cornhuskers went on to beat Penn State 30-23 for their first win Saturday. McCaffrey took over for Adrian Martinez, who had started all of his 23 previous games, but he turned in flat performances in the Cornhuskers' first 2 games after they especially had a game against Wisconsin canceled due to Wisconsin's COVID concerns. A top 10 team to start the season, the Lions are now 0-4 and off to their worst start since Joe Paterno's 2001 team also opened with 4 straight losses. Clifford struggled again for Penn State, and he was relieved by Will Levis after turning over the ball on the 2 of the Lions' first 3 possessions. Nebraska led 27-6 at halftime, but the Lions pulled within 30-23 and had a chance to tie or go ahead in the final 4 minutes. They got the ball on turnovers after Levis threw 4 straight incompletions from the 11-yard line. Nebraska went 3-and-out, and Levis moved the ball to the 9. He threw into desperation under pressure from Ben Style on 4th down, and the Huskers ran out the clock. The Cornhuskers led 24-3 early in the second quarter, and Javar Bettis took a flip from McCaffrey and ran 45 yards untouched on a jet sweep. One of McCaffrey's highlights came late in the first half as defensive lineman Fred Hinchard was about to wrap him up, but the big takeaway from this is that Nebraska's defense looked amazing, absolutely amazing. Don't know if that's what that says about Nebraska or if that says more about Penn State's offense, and McCaffrey capitalized on his opportunity. He brought a spark to the offense that was definitely missing. The Lions out-yarded the Huskers 105-298, but turnovers continued to plague them, and they're staring at the possibility of an 0-5 start for the first time in the program since 1887. Clifford threw 3 interceptions on 2 of his last 3 series against Maryland last week and was picked off and fumbled on 2 of their first 3 series against the Huskers. Up next, Penn State hosts Iowa on November 21st, and the Huskers host Illinois on November 21st. The Huskers are 6-1 against the Illinois since joining the Big Ten. Next up, we got what you would refer to in tennis as a bagel. Number 10, Indiana, a week before their big game against Ohio State, beat the Michigan State Spartans 24-0, as you would say in tennis. Like I said, a bagel for Ty Fogel and number 10, Indiana. Each game brings something new to be excited about. Fogel had 11 catches for 200 yards, surpassing career highs he had set just a week earlier, and the Hoosiers handled Michigan State 24-0. On Saturday, Indiana remains unbeaten and turning what looked like a potential trap game into an easy win. Penix threw for 320 yards and hit Fogel for 2 touchdown passes. He also had 2 big interceptions in the first half, however, but that didn't really matter. The Spartans, who are now 1-3, their only win coming as an upset to Michigan, previously ranked Michigan, doesn't really look like an upset anymore, was just as sloppy to the point where Rocky Lombardi was pulled in the second quarter. Vogel did most of his damage in the first 2 quarters when all the game's scoring occurred. Michigan State was shut out at home for the first time since the 31-0 loss to Michigan in 1985. And Indiana has won its first 4 Big Ten games for the first time since 1987. And the Hoosiers beat Michigan State for the Old Brass Spartoon for only the second time in the last 12 years. Since beating rival Michigan on October 31st, the Spartans have lost their last 2 games by a combined 73-7. Michigan State and Indiana combined for 5 turnovers in the first 18 minutes, but only the Hoosiers showed any ability to take advantage. Indiana went up 24-0 when Penix found Fogel on the right sideline for a 65-yard touchdown pass, and the main takeaway from this is the Hoosiers did not get a letdown after a big win over Michigan last weekend. They took advantage of Michigan State early and are preparing for their big game against Ohio to play against Ohio State next weekend. The Buckeyes are the only other unbeaten team in the Big Ten East, but had to have their game called off after their game against Maryland was canceled. Michigan State is scheduled to play Maryland next Saturday, but the Terrapins have an elevated number of COVID-19 cases, which caused the cancellation against Ohio State. It's hard to view anyone's schedule with this much uncertainty at this point. Next up for our Big Ten game, our final 2 Big Ten games, we're going to go over. We have number 13, Wisconsin, who is back after a 2-week hiatus, versus Michigan, the Michigan Wolverines. Number 13, Wisconsin, was ready, not rusty, in its first game in 3 weeks. Michigan, meanwhile, looked lost and lifeless in a 3rd straight loss. Nikita Watson and Mason Stokes each scored 2 touchdowns in the first half, helping the Badgers build a big lead in the 49-11 rout of the Wolverines on Saturday night. Wisconsin, who is now 2-0 after having a 2-week hiatus due to a COVID breakout within the program. Coach Paul Christ said, "I'm really proud of the way everyone has kind of worked through what we've gone through. The Wolverines fell behind 28-0 at halftime, and this was their largest deficit at home since the Big House opened in 1927, and they finished with their most lopsided loss at home since the 1935 loss to Ohio State. We were thoroughly beaten in every phase, Coach Jim Harbaugh acknowledged after their latest loss dropped Michigan to their worst start since 1967. We didn't do anything well, we didn't play good, we did not coach well. Early on, it appeared that Michigan might be able to put off a fight before getting knocked out in front of friends and family in its mostly empty stadium. The Wolverines forced Graham Metz-led offense to punt after the game's opening possession, only to give the ball back on the next snap when a drop pass was picked up. Wisconsin's first 2 touchdowns, Watson's 2-yard run and Metz's 1-yard pass to Stoke, were 4 plays after Joe Milton's passes were intercepted. The running back and fullback scored their second touchdown on runs in the second quarter, giving the Badgers a 28-0 lead that was large enough against an offensively challenged team. Metz, who started their first game against Illinois and had 5 touchdowns, was 12 of 22 for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Metz tested positive for COVID-19 and said he had a series of symptoms for 4 or 5 days. I guess is the reality we live in now. Christ said Metz had a couple days prepared for the game after being cleared for what he had and the time he had. He did a good job of coming back. As of last week, the Badgers had 27 active COVID cases, including 15 players and 12 staffers. The big takeaway from this is the program scored a victory where its test results were good enough to resume the season. The Badgers must hope to play and win their final 4 scheduled games because teams must play at least 6 games to qualify for the league champion in a pandemic-shorted year. Michigan's 6th season, Harbaugh's 6th season, the start of the state of his program, is being scrutinized, and he doesn't seem to have the answers to fix many of the program's problems that had a team ranked number 16 in the preseason. Harbaugh has fallen to 0-11 as an underdog at Michigan. With only 1 year under his contract, his next chance to pull off an upset might be December 12th on the road against Ohio State. Poll implications are here. The Badgers might move up a little. After slipping in the 2 weeks, they were idle after raising to number 9 in the AP polls. After the win over Illinois in week 1, they might have a chance to get back in the top 10. And lastly, we are going to look at number 23, Purdue. Number 23, Northwestern. They went against the Purdue Boilermakers for an exciting game, to say the least, a mid-afternoon game. Peyton Ramsey took advantage of his expertise Saturday, and he had nimble feet to evade pass rushers, remained poised against under pressure, and kept Northwestern moving down the field. The Wildcats needed a solid performance from the fifth-year senior, and they got it. Ramsey made up for his stifled rushing attack by throwing for 212 yards and 3 touchdowns, leading number 3 Northwestern to a 27-20 victory over Purdue. I don't want to speak for him, but man, it looks like he was having fun, said Coach Patrick Shields, who played on the last Wildcats team to start 4-0 in league play in 1996. I don't know what it looks like on TV, but on the boundary, this guy is awesome. The Boilers have seen enough of Ramsey in the past 2 seasons. Ramsey threw 3 touchdown passes and ran for 2 scores over Indiana's halftime win at Purdue last season when he played at Purdue. This time he was equally poised. Ramsey finished 23 of 36 with 1 interception and hooked it up with Ramon Chicono Barani on all 3 scores. The graduate transfer also ran 6 times for 21 yards, routinely extending plays while improving to 8-4 as a starter over the last 4 years. That's what he's known to do, Purdue linebacker Derek Barnes said, referring to Ramsey's mobility. We have to do a better job against these types of quarterbacks. The Wildcats' defense was strong yet again. It held Purdue to 2 rushing yards and made 2 late stops to preserve a 5th straight Big Ten victory. Ramsey was the key here right from the start. His 8-yard touchdown pass on the opening possession ended Chicago Brown's 3-year scoring drought. After the team traded field goals and Aiden O'Connell tossed a tying 40-yard touchdown pass to Garrett Miller on a 4th and run, Ramsey did go back to work. Big takeaway here is that Northwestern has a stifling defense and a solid ground game that will keep the Wildcats atop the Big Ten's West Division for at least 1 more week. But if they continue to be this productive, they could be a serious contender in the Big Ten. And this week's poll implications is that the Wildcats made their first top 25 appearance since the first time in 2018. They should stay there at least 1 more week and could climb a few spots too. Up next, Northwestern hosts number 13 Wisconsin next Saturday in another crucial division showdown, and Purdue will then visit the Minnesota Gophers in Friday Night Lights. With all that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC College Football Podcast Network. I really enjoyed talking with you all today, hanging out, chit-chatting college football. I really appreciate all your continued support. Like I said, I really hope the audio sounds okay on this. My computer has been super weird all week. I have to get it fixed tomorrow. I have the appointment scheduled. And I'm sorry if the audio sounds weird. I'm thankful if my boss edits this. If I'm able to edit it, thank you to whoever listened to this today. I really enjoyed talking to you all. I'll be back on Thursday for a really fun episode. I have some exciting things planned for you all. And with that being said, please make sure to leave us a review and subscribe to us. Leave us 5 stars. Leave us a nice review. It really helps us out. Really helps the podcast out. Helps us grow. And with all that being said, thank you guys so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to other podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. And I will talk to you all on Thursday. Have a great night, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.